What is good, guys? Welcome back to our channel. This week, an exciting new deck profile for an entirely different game, being Shadowverse. And for those who know us, most of us on Team Valkyrie's Chosen have been playing Shadowverse for a while now, and we're quite excited about the game. So we kind of want to test it out and see if this kind of content also works on the same channel. But even if people don't like it, we really like the game, so we want to push it and hope that more people end up wanting to pick up the game and join us in building a community around it. And so I'm going to cover my Armed PDK deck I've used at BSF Belgium. Sadly, I did not make top 8, but this deck went 4-0 that day. And so I'm quite excited to show you how this deck works, how it's built, and what interactions it has available for itself. The big thing I thought before going into BSF was that I had to play one of the meta decks for Dragon, being Discard, or well, there's this other PDK build you have. I did not even test that one, but I was thinking I had to play Discard because that was supposed to be the best build. But this deck just delivered, and I even had a game during the side event against a Discard Dragon deck, and I just noticed that my deck outpaced it completely. And so I'm quite excited to show you how this deck really functions, but I had to flex a little bit. I was running all 4 evolutions for Levitine just because I had the room in the extra deck, but obviously this is not the ideal way to build the deck. It's just cool to have access to all 4 forms in the extra deck, because they might just come up, because I think I went into at least these 2 forms, which was quite exciting because I thought at first the attack form was not that strong, so it's really cool. Now, to do this deck profile, I'll go over all of the cards in order of their card cost, which I think is the most efficient way to do it. And then after I've done that, I'll try to show off a little bit of combos you can do or how you have to scale throughout the game. So let's get that setup ready. For 1 cost, we're playing 2 Blazing Breath, which is your cheapest and most best removal you have at that cost point, because it's able to remove a 4 once you're in overflow. So that's a really good card for Dragon. And at first I actually cut it entirely and had no card in that 1 cost slot that I could actually play on turn 1. And I noticed a lot of decks that start to aggro me would actually push me to like 16 or 14 health over a couple of turns, and I had no answers to it. So having 2 Blazing Breath feels pretty safe, because you can just pass your first turn, and if you have it in your hand, you're kind of safe to just stop their early aggro. 3 copies of Armor Burst, and I'll immediately put the next card, and 3 copies of Dragonic Smash. So these are the armed spells, which are searchable by the effect of Hammer Dragonoot, which we also run it for, and which is immediately one of the best cards in the entire deck. So let's talk about these for a bit. Armor Burst is the whole reason you want to run armed with anything really, because it allows you to bounce a card on your field back to your EX area, pop something on your opponent's field that has 3 or less attack, or like deals 3 damage to something. And the card being in your EX area is kind of safe, because your opponent cannot really touch it outside of Earth, which they'll still have to evolve and do stuff with. So most people don't even run it, or if they run it a low copy, so it's not really likely that they'll be able to see it, but that would be a way to out it. But most people cannot touch your EX area, meaning the card is just saved there as if it's being in your hand, and you can just play it again next turn, which works amazingly with cards like Dark Dragoon Forte, which people probably caught on. The only downside is this card asks for an armed follower, so you need to have an armed follower on your field, and also your opponent needs to have something on his field to be able to damage it with this card. So the cool thing is he does give you a Dragonic weapon, so if you use it in the early game, you kind of have this ready for later on to be able to arm your Dark Dragoon Fortes. But you do need an extra card on your field to be able to resolve this, which means this is a fake 1 cost, because generally you'll have to at least commit something else or have something on board from the turn prior. And that's why we really need the Blazing Breath as our 1 cost removal. We then have Dragonic Smash, which is a quick, which is also pretty important, because you're able to save your play points and use this at the end of your turn, at the end of your opponent's turn on attack of your opponent's unit. So this does help a lot in good removal, and since it's searchable, you can kind of high roll and get these and have extra removal. Because Dragon does not have that big of a hand size, being able to search removal spells is pretty good. The nice thing about this, it also gives us a Dragonic weapon, so it sets up for that later turn on top of the removal we get. So Hammer Dragonoot, he's the big guy, he's the reason we can play these spells and find them efficiently. but he's also one of our most threatening early game units. So the cool thing about Hammer Dragoon is he checks top 4, adds a armed spell to your hand and puts the rest at the bottom. This thing can whiff, but honestly it's pretty fine with those 6. If you don't see them in your opening hand, it's likely you'll hit at least 1, or if you play him twice, you'll at least hit 1. So he generally pluses, and then for 1 cost we can evolve him. And his evolved form is the one thing most players actually don't even realize is a threat, because they tend to just leave him on the field, being like, yeah, just aggro face, and I don't really care about your Hammer Dragonoot. But when he evolves, he deals 2 damage to the opponent's leader. So if this thing survives, you can just evolve it for 1 cost, it deals 2 damage to the leader, and you swing, and that's another 3 damage, so that's 5 damage in a single turn. And this thing kind of is capable of threatening lethal, because if you play it in the late game as well and you've already used 2, your opponent does not know if you have a 3rd one, so they're forced to also remove this on top of whatever else you have on your field. Because if they ignore this because they're like, oh, it's only a 2-2, they're gonna suffer, because the extra damage from this is super relevant. And this actually came up in one of my games where an Uma Musume player had to decide on how he would clear my board, and he did choose to clear the Hammer Dragonoot and not the PDK, I believe, or something like that. I don't remember exactly how it went, but there was something like that, and he decided to clear the Hammer Dragonoot, but I was like, I don't even have the Evo, he doesn't know. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, Hammer Dragonoot currently at 2. If you're not as like me and don't want to run all the forms, you can easily cut a couple of these to run on 3rd copy, because this card will give you so much value in terms of pressure. And that's why I really like Armed Dragon, because it allows you to pressure immediately from early stages of the game, and you don't have to like stall a lot with a lot of removal cards. You're also applying pressure to your opponent to make your end game pieces more threatening. So yeah, Hammer Dragonoot at 3, because he's one of the best 2-drops we have. And then for the final 2-drop we have Dragon's Oracle. You gotta play ramp. It's one of those things that if you see it early, it turbos your game so much, and it works really well with Hammer Dragonoot, because you can play him. Once you've ramped, you have 4 play points, right? And so you can play him, do his check, find something like either of these, and well, if you find this one, you still have the play points to play it, but if you have this one, you can evolve him, deal the damage, swing on somebody on the field, use this effect, it goes back to the X area. Obviously, if something returns to the X area, it de-evolves, so it becomes the base form again. It deals another 3 damage, so you killed about 2 things at least on the field, and you have follow-up for next turn to just search again, potentially burn again. So him being a 2-cost synergizes really well with the ramp effects as well. So yeah, we gotta play Dragon's Oracle, and in the late game it's also just a draw, which can totally help dig through our deck for the pieces we need. There's 2 2-costs left, whoopsie. And these are pretty important as well. So we have Fire Lizard and Aquanroid, and both of these synergize with PDK. So let's bring PDK to the table, because they are the true star of the deck. The reason why this deck can keep up is because of the control this card offers. So for those who don't know PDK, she is a 1/5, 3 play points to play. Whenever another Dragoncraft follower that costs 3 or less is put onto the field, you select an enemy follower on the field, deal a 2 damage and 1 to the leader. So this allows you to control the board very aggressively, because every time you're dealing 2 damage to something on board, even combined with this, you're capable of shooting 3 damage to something, and this thing, you shoot 4 damage to something. So that really helps you clear most of the things they would have on their board at turn 3 or 4. And then on top, it deals that 1 damage to the leader, which causes you to actually really whittle their health down, combined with something like Hammer Dragonoot. And so you kind of have a lot of ways to push them into that lethal range. And so she is kind of the core of the deck. You kind of need to see her as well during the game, because otherwise your pressure is a lot lower, and your opponent will actually always focus on trying to remove this. And so if you have Dragonic weapons, it's always really nice to just put them on Prime Dragon Keeper. The only matchup where it's not that great is in Forest or Havencraft, because they have different types of removal, but against all of the other crafts, pushing this up to a 6 tends to be pretty relevant, because they have a really hard time to get rid of it. I also generally don't swing with it. The 1 damage is nice, and if you know that you're in a really good spot, you can totally do it. but you kind of want to make sure she's safe and don't swing with her all that much. So Fire Lizard, this is a really special card. It's a 2 cost, 3 attack, 2 defense, so it's really threatening already by itself, because if you play it on turn 2, your opponent's kind of forced to deal with it because 3 damage is a lot. But also when you play him, he already shoots 1 damage to the leader or a follower on the field. And so this aggression, the 1 extra damage, actually won me one of my games where I was playing the deciding event against a Abyss deck that discarded my hand, and I needed to do only 1 damage, and the card I top decked was the Fire Lizard. So that was amazing because he also had blockers on the field, so even something like Forte wouldn't have mattered, just the Fire Lizard drop and 1 damage to leader, game. So he's really good, and the 1 damage is more relevant than it looks. And because he's versatile in shooting either to leader or follower, combining with PDK means that she can do 3 damage to something on the field, which is also a very relevant defense stat. And so yeah, Fire Lizard, super good. Aquaneroid, she is the finisher mostly, combined with PDK, because whenever she's summoned, she gets a Mega Lorca on the field. A Mega Lorca is also below 3 cost, so this causes PDK to trigger twice, shooting 2 damage to the leader and 4 damage to board. And the nice thing is that if you're in overflow, so turn 7 or beyond, or turn 6 if you manage to use Dragon's Oracle and get an extra play point, your Mega Lorca gets Storm. And so this thing can immediately swing as well. So combined with Prime Dagger Keeper, this whole play is 4 damage. Now it kind of goes further, because we play armed, we get a lot of value out of being able to combo with Armor Burst. So if we in the early game manage to put down a Dragonic weapon, we can actually put that weapon on Aquaneroids, so now she becomes armed, and we can Armor Burst her to the X area, play her again, she gets another Mega Lorca on the field, she again triggers the Prime Dragon Keeper, causing it to shoot another 2 damage, and then we have another Mega Lorca with Storm, so that's 8 damage total. And for those who counted, as long as Prime Dragon Keeper is already on the field, this entire play only costed 5 play points. So it's a turn 7 play, obviously you can't do it earlier, but it's kind of crazy that you can't do it. So this is a really good play you can make, and it actually won me one of the games against Uma Musume, where I managed to do this play, shoot for the final 8 life points they had. So yeah, super cool combo, and it gives you so much value. And even in the early game, if you don't have F Rush yet, it's just good to summon while the Prime Dragon Keeper is on the field, because you get the Orca, and then even Armor Bursting already at that point isn't bad, because the Orca is still a 2-2 on the field, so they want to deal with it, because otherwise you just swing with the 2-2, because this is kind of like your Goblin. So yeah, really good card. Let's put these aside. So now I'm really done with the 2 costs, and I will go over a couple of 3 costs. One of the best removals Dragon has, it's Serpent's Wrath. It's a quick, so you can also use it during your opponent's turn, which is really relevant. And then it deals 5 damage for 3 costs, so that's a really nice amount of damage. And if you're on turn on 7 play points or more, you actually draw a card. So the extra draw on this helps you even dig in the late game, because I had a couple of games where I just drew into this during the late turns and I was like, okay, right, so I can dig deeper. I still have like 5 play points left. There's a good chance I can still do something with the cards I receive. So this card is really good. I try to not use it too early if I have the chance, because I do like the extra draw, because this deck does not have the greatest of hand size. But if you have to use it early, it's still a really good removal and deals with most of the threatening things in the game. We then have 2 armed cards to go over, and Sybil the Waterworm. So it's the alt art. It was cheaper, so I decided to go for this one, but this is Sybil of the Waterworm. This card is one of the cards I'm most likely to cut in the future. I do not really feel like it's all that relevant. Her fanfare effect says if you are in overflow, so 7 play points or more, you do get +1 attack, +1 defense, and you increase your maximum play points. So the increase in maximum play points can be relevant because you keep outscaling your opponent, but generally once you're at 7, you're kind of fine for most of your plays, and so it does not always matter. On the other hand, at the end of your turn, you get +1 health to your leader every turn, and then if you're in overflow, it's +2 health. So the +2 health could actually help you out, but because the deck is more aggressively built, you're kind of focusing on trying to win the game instead of stalling until you play something big. And so I don't feel like she is all that great for this specific deck. She did help me out a couple of times, but never felt like she was the most broken thing I could have drawn. Like, I would have liked any of the other cards more at that point. So this thing will be replaced when I find something better, but currently in the set 4, there really wasn't anything that fit the same role or like helped really with the strategy. So she's in there at 2, but I would definitely not run her at more right now. And let's see if set 5 finally gives something that can replace it. So that's Callan. Then we have Dragoneer. This is the card that's run in every dragon deck. Simply, when he's played, you get a dragonic weapon. And for those who don't know, because I actually didn't went over it, it's an amulet that you can rest and crack to give something on your field +1 defense and armed. So, and the armed trait is pretty much just important because of armor burst. And so this thing, when it evolves, has the effect to do 2 damage to a card on the field. But if you have something with the armed trait, so if you have this on field, this is obviously already armed, but anything else you can equip with the dragonic weapon, it becomes armed, and so then it shoots 4 damage to any follower on the field. And so that's really big. It's a good amount of damage. We run him at 3 in the main deck because he also just helps us get consistency on the dragonic weapon because we want to be able to do our combos. And then if we're capable of evolving him, he tends to deal with most of the things on the board and then is a 4/4. And it's sometimes even interesting to put the dragonic weapon onto him because then he becomes a 4/5 and can pretty much safely swing into most things that are on the field, even on the later turns as well. So he's actually pretty sturdy. If you don't have him, you can always just replace him with Dragonic Warrior, but I really like the place with Dragonic Weapon, and I feel if you play around arms, he's just very consistent as well, because if you've played something like this on the earlier turns, or even have the Hammer Dragonood still on the field, he immediately triggers and you don't even have to use the Dragonic Weapon on this specific play. So yeah, he's pretty good. He's at 3. The 2 in the extra deck are definitely not mandatory. I feel like you can get away with 1, because I generally only evolve him once during the game, but you're capable of armor bursting him as well, so it's obviously great to always have at least 2 of these. Then we have Lance Lizard. His effect is once you're in overflow, so 7 play points, he gets a dragonic weapon on the field, and then whenever he is selected for an ability, you can give him +1 attack and shoot 1 damage to the opponent's leader. This ability is once per turn, but what does this mean? You're capable of targeting him with the dragonic weapon, he gets +1 defense, and then his own skill gives him +1 attack and shoots 1 damage, and then he's 4/5, which is actually quite threatening and tends to be the big focus of what your opponent wants to clear. And so if you had this on field earlier, you can just call him on turn 3 and immediately do it, which is most of the times really hard for your opponent to clear. So this puts in a lot of pressure, and because it already shoots a damage, it's kind of hard for your opponent also just to realize how much pressure this one card could give. Because if you then get another dragonic weapon during the next turn by playing something like Dragoneer, this actually equips again on him, he gets an extra stat, and he shoots an extra damage. So at that point he's already doing 7 damage, combining the 2 turns obviously, but yeah, he can put in a lot of extra pressure, but he's harder to play around with, so he tends to be like this final play I can do, because he also just synergizes with PDK, because you summon him, PDK shoots damage, he gets his own dragonic weapon, you equip him, he shoots an extra damage. So it gives you that small whittling down damage type of playstyle that really is important for this deck. So that's it for the 3 costs, and now we go into the high end of the deck. We obviously run Dark Dragoon Forte at 3 copies. This is the best finisher that we have in Dragon. Most people would think she should have had a higher cost because she's just so good, but no, she's a 4 cost and she's only 2 to evolve, so she's a 5/1 with Storm. The 1 is obviously low, so your opponent would probably try to clear this if you just put it down. So always ask how many play points they have left, so you know if they can just Angelic Snipe this. But if you do have the play points to evolve it, she gets Aura, and she becomes a 7/3. So when she has Aura, she cannot be targeted by cards, and so that means she's protected from stuff like Angelic Snipe and can safely swing for 7 damage. And the good thing is, if you went second and you have these Evo points, and it's turn 10 and you happen to have a Dragonic weapon on the field, you can actually shoot for a lot of damage. And the reason for that is you can combo with Armor Burst. So she is 4 to play, so at that point you used up 4 play points. You then evolve with 1 evo point and with her own effect, so that's 5 play points. You can then swing for 7 to face. You probably have equipped this already, so it's a 7-4, and then you Armor Burst, causing it to go back to the AX area. And since you have 4 play points left, you can play Forte, and you can probably equip it again with this, but that's probably not that relevant unless you have a second one, and then you can make it a 5-3 and then it still swings over the Angelic Snipe, but that's less likely to be the case. But again, for 5 damage, and that will cause you to do 12 damage to face in that single turn. So Forte is really threatening, and being able to combo it with Armor Burst can just steal games sometimes. But even if you can't do the insane combo, being able to go into Forte Evolved, swinging, and then Armor Bursting it so it's safe in the X area, means your opponent has to stare it down, and they'll know that next turn you'll just play it again, evolve again, swing for 7, doing 14 damage over the course of 2 turns. This also happened in one of my games against other Umai Musume's player, so I played against it twice during BSF. They were digging through their deck hoping to find a single card that they could use to win that game right at the spot, because they realized they had no way to stop the Forte that was in the X area. So this card is insane, and it synergizes really well with what Armed Dragon wants to do. I feel like this is the boss card of the deck, mostly. We'll talk about Leviathan after this, but he is more of a filler card, I'd say, because he's just cool and he works with the archetype, but this is the thing we focus on because this is the best card in Dragon. So yeah, get your Fortes right. So we have 2 Leviathan dragons. Leviathan, he is the poster boy for Armed, but in the current environment he's not that great. He'll be great once we get set 10, but that's quite far away. The one thing that makes him really cool is that he has 4 evolve forms, meaning that he's kind of this very versatile card. The downside is he is a 6 to play and a 1 to evolve, so turn 7 if you go first, turn 6 if you have an evo point, but it's kind of hard to commit to this card most of the time because it feels like it does not do enough to get the game back to your hand. It's more of like a win more card, I'd say. The best evolve form I found is actually just Leviathan Dragon Evolved, because it has Assail, meaning it can swing on standing units, and then on evolve you get a Dragonic weapon and recover 2 play points. And so the recovery of 2 play points is really nice if you went second, so you play this for 6, you evolve it for a play point, and then you go back up to 2 play points, and now you're capable of playing one of your Dragonic Smashes defensively, or like even just the Blazing Breath defensively, giving you this little tool to control your opponent during the next turn. And being able to assail means you swing on standing units of your opponent, so you're capable of clearing those, and because of the extra defense it's a 6-7 if need be, so it does help in controlling the board a lot. Leviathan Dragon Blast form, I've only managed to use this to bring this out once. This is only good if you're winning already, because you kind of just need something like your Draconeer on the field, or like a PDK that you've equipped with an armed Dragonic weapon, so it's already armed. So this deals 2 damage for each armed follower on your field, which is only 2 if he's the only card, but if you have multiple cards it becomes like 4, and 4 is generally enough to clear the board, and if it's 6, literally nothing survives. The one cool thing about this one is it has Intimidate, so if you're capable of swinging with it, your opponent has a harder time clearing because they can't swing into it and they have to use removal spells, and because he has 6 defense, that's quite high, but it's hard to go into this card reliably. We then have Attack form. He's really situational, but he can actually steal the game or set you in the situation where you can win the game the next turn. So he has an effect Strike, where you select an enemy follower on the field, deal 4 damage to it and 3 damage to the leader. So the cool thing is, if they have 1 resting thing, you can swing into the resting thing. Strike means on attack, so on attack you choose a standing unit, deal it 4 damage and then 3 to the leader, causing you to be able to half clear the board generally, and then still put in the pressure you need to be able to win on the next turn. And then there's Levity Dragon Defense form. And this is probably the one that is the best right now. Even though I haven't been into this one in like most games. I think I've made it once against Egg recently and it kind of helped me out there. But generally in my other games, I feel like this is the most important one. But defense form, he's a big ward, so it could help you if you're low on health. And he says that any damage he takes is reduced by 1. So he might be a 7 defense, but generally your opponent has to clear it in 2 steps. So he's kind of a 9 defense guard, which is really, really high. And so he's a lot of value. And then at the start of your end phase, you heal your leader for 3. And this heal for 3, just doing it once is generally already enough to get you back out of lethal range against most decks. So going into this against something like Sword could just save you from dying on the spot, because they have to use a lot of small pokes to clear this, unless they execute it, which is sad, but still, they have to try and clear this. So this might just be the one thing you can go into the most often, depending on the meta. But this is just generically good against most decks. So if you really want to cut a couple, these two are the most cuttable. But I feel like the more you run of these, the better this card is. So if you can't run them all, it might just be better to cut Levitine by itself, because he's a bit iffy, to say the least. But I got ESL, so I guess I have to run him, right? Anyway, for the final card of the deck, we run 1 copy of Genesis Dragon. Genesis Dragon is a 9 cost, 10 attack, 12 defense with Storm. And I've never managed to finish the game with this card, so if you want to replace this with something else, you can totally do, but we need cards like Forte to finish the game, so why not run the more expensive version of Forte? It does not have aura, but it's 12 defense, so it's unlikely to just be killed by your opponent's card. The problem is, generally, if we're at 9 play points, my opponent has such a big field with a lot of ward pieces that just going 12 on a ward feels really bad, because it just does not push the game. But this could theoretically be the one piece you need to win the game, because it has Storm. And so that's why we run it, because you need to see Storm pieces to really finish the game off. You can whittle them down a lot, but after a while your opponent will recuperate and clear your board enough so that you don't really have anything anymore, and this could be the top deck you just need to be like game. So yeah, that's it for the entire deck. I actually went over most of the combos, I guess, so there's really no reason to go over a combo segment. So whenever you play this deck, just remind yourself that Armor Burst is your best friend, and so keeping a Dragonic weapon on the field is never bad. But depending on the matchups, you may just want to buff up your guys so your opponent has a harder time to clear. And pressure your opponent as hard as you can from as early as you can. And that's how you should be able to win the game, because this deck is really fast. Okay, that was it for the video. I hope you guys liked it. If you have more questions, I'll try to answer them in the comments down below. We might be trying to look into fight content as well for this game, because it's really fun to play and the games are pretty fast, so that might be something we try to do in the future. But if you have tips for how we could make better deck profiles for Shadowverse, or just how we can cover this content optimally, please tell us down below. See you in the next one.